The ash fell like snow on Nirella. Siora Vel watched it through the narrow slit of the underground bunker's observation port, a grim reminder of what had become of her world. 6 months ago, this valley had been lush with purple-leaved flora and teeming with life. Now, it was a wasteland of gray, the once vibrant ecosystem reduced to cinders by Tazari orbital bombardment. She closed the port, the magnetic seal hissing as it locked into place. Behind her, nearly 2,000 survivors huddled in the vast network of caverns that had once been research facilities. Children who had forgotten what sunlight felt like. Elders who had lost the will to speak. And between them, the desperate remnants of what had once been the most peaceful civilization in the Andromeda sector. Siora, a voice called from behind. It was Tanae, her younger brother, his face gaunt from months of rationing, but his eyes still bright with that infuriating optimism. The council is waiting. She nodded, steeling herself. Before the invasion, Siora had been a neurological physician, specializing in memory reconstruction for trauma victims. Now, she commanded what remained of Nirella's resistance, not through any qualification, but merely because she had been the one to organize the first evacuations when the Tazari ships darkened their skies. "Tell them I'm coming," she said, adjusting the medical scanner at her belt, a relic of her former life that now served to detect radiation levels and identify Tazari mind control implants. The central chamber was dimly lit to conserve power. 12 faces turned toward her as she entered, the last remaining members of a governance structure that had once prided itself on never having built weapons or waged wars. That philosophical stance had made them easy prey for the Tazari, a species that viewed peaceful worlds as nothing more than resources to be harvested. "We have 3 days of nutrition supplements left," announced Elder Urel, her voice cracking. "The hydroponics labs were compromised in the last raid. The fungal cultures are failing." Siora felt the familiar weight of hopelessness pressing down. "And the northwestern tunnels?" "Collapsed," replied Marin, head of their engineering division. "Tazari ground forces deployed sonic disruptors. They're methodically sealing us in." In the silence that followed, Siora could hear the distant drip of water. How ironic that their world, once known as the blue jewel of the sector for its vast oceans and rainfall, would now see their final survivors die of thirst. "We should consider the honorable end protocol," said Colin, a former philosopher whose studies of theoretical ethics had never prepared him for the reality of extinction. Better to depart with dignity than to be captured for Tazari experimentation. Several council members nodded grimly. The protocol, a mass, painless euthanasia, had been drafted in the 3rd month of hiding, when they'd first realized the scope of their defeat. "No," Tanae interrupted, his voice sharp. "The emissary stars are aligned. The ancient texts say—" "Enough mysticism," snapped Urel. "Your grandmother's star charts won't save us, boy." Siora raised a hand, silencing them both. Her brother's fascination with the old astronomy texts had become his refuge from reality, but she couldn't bear to crush his hope, futile though it might be. "We'll make our decision tomorrow," she said firmly. "One more day of searching for alternatives." The meeting dispersed, council members shuffling back to their respective duties. Only Tanae remained, his lean frame leaning against the rough-hewn wall. "You don't believe me," he said softly. Siora sighed, running a hand through her silver-streaked hair. "I believe you believe, Tanae. Sometimes that has to be enough." He stepped closer, pulling a worn piece of parchment from his pocket, one of the few artifacts they'd managed to save from the Grand Library before it was reduced to cinders. "Look here," he insisted, pointing to a configuration of dots. "The emissary stars. When they align, the texts say, salvation comes from the void. Tomorrow night, they'll be in perfect alignment for the first time in 3 centuries." Siora managed a tired smile. "Then we'll watch them together before we decide." Above them, unseen through layers of rock and soil, Supreme Commander Vorik of the Tazari Expansion Fleet stood on the bridge of his command ship, watching the destruction with cold satisfaction. His angular, armored body reflected the red glow of planetary scanners as they methodically mapped the underground caverns where the last Nirellans hid. "The tunnel network is more extensive than we thought," reported his second-in-command. but we've identified their main air recyclers. One targeted strike, and they'll suffocate within hours. Vorik's metallic mouth parts clicked in what passed for a smile among his kind. No, let them linger. I want them to feel every moment of their extinction. It provides better data for the assimilation archives. He turned to the panoramic viewport, surveying the once beautiful planet they had systematically stripped. The Nirellans had been so pathetically unprepared, their civilization so focused on art, science, and exploration that they hadn't even developed basic planetary defenses. It was almost disappointing how quickly they had fallen. Any communication from the other sector fleets? Vorik asked. Yes, Commander. The Cygnus Arm expansion proceeds on schedule. 17 more habitable planets charted for invasion within the stellar year. Good. Vorik's eyes narrowed. Prepare the mind control division. Tomorrow we'll begin extracting the remaining Nirellans. I want their cultural knowledge intact for processing. Their artistic sensibilities will make excellent entertainment for our elite cast. As night fell over the ruined planet, neither the hunted below nor the hunters above noticed the faint distortion in space at the edge of the system, a ripple that heralded the arrival of 3 massive ships, their hulls bearing unfamiliar markings in a language neither Nirellan nor Tazari could read. The last meal had been distributed, watery soup and a quarter portion of synthetic protein. Siora had given half her share to a young mother whose milk was running dry, ignoring Tanea's disapproving look. Leaders needed to set examples, even if those examples hastened their own end. In the makeshift infirmary, she made her rounds. 28 injured from the last Tazuri raid, 3 of them critical. Her medical training felt like a cruel joke now. She could diagnose with precision, but had no medicines to treat her patients. The Tazari had destroyed their medical synthesis labs in the first wave, understanding that hope often died alongside healing. Still playing doctor? A rasping voice came from the corner cot. It was Emran, once Nirella's foremost botanist, now blind from Tazari flash weapons. You should save your energy, Commander. Siora checked his bandages, noting the spreading infection. Old habits, she replied softly. We're past saving, you know. Emran's cloudy eyes seemed to stare through her. I don't fear the end. I only regret that all our knowledge will die with us. 10,000 years of Nirellan civilization, erased as if we never existed. Siora had no answer for that. The preservation of their cultural archives had been a priority until the power cells started failing. Now survival consumed every resource. After completing her rounds, she found Tanae waiting at the entrance to the observatory dome, a small chamber where a narrow shaft cut through the rock to provide a sliver of view of the night sky. You came, he said, surprise and pleasure mingling in his voice. I promised, didn't I? Siora settled beside him on the cold floor. Through the narrow aperture above, stars were becoming visible as Nirella's primary sun dipped below the horizon. There, Tanae pointed upward. The emissary formation is nearly complete. Another hour and they'll be perfectly aligned. Siora leaned back against the wall. Tell me again the story grandmother told you. About the stars. Tanae's face brightened. For a moment, he looked like the boy he'd been before the invasion. The curious child who'd spent nights identifying constellations while his sister studied medical texts. The ancient Nirellans believed that we weren't alone in the cosmos, he began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller. That among the stars were other beings who watched over developing civilizations. They called them the emissaries, travelers who would appear in times of great need, when a worthy species faced extinction. And these emissaries, they came from the stars that are aligning tonight. Tanae nodded. According to the texts, when these 7 stars align, it creates a cosmic pathway. The emissaries could travel through it to reach worlds in distress. He paused, then added softly, the alignment only happens once every 300 years. Siora watched her brother's profile in the dim light. She couldn't bring herself to point out the obvious, that if cosmic saviors existed, they would have appeared when the Tazari first arrived, not after months of suffering and death. It's a beautiful story, she said instead. It's not just a story. Tanea's voice held an edge. The ancient texts describe them in detail. Bipedal beings like us, but different. Warriors and healers who. A low rumble interrupted him, the floor beneath them trembling. Siora jumped to her feet, adrenaline flooding her system. Another bombing run, she said, already moving toward the exit. We need to get everyone to the deep shelters. But Tane remained seated, his gaze fixed on the sliver of sky. No, he said, with strange certainty. It's not the Tazari. Tane, we don't have time for. The rumbling intensified, and then changed quality, becoming a series of impacts, rather than the continuous vibration of bombardment. And there was something else, a sound she'd never heard before, a high-pitched whine that seemed to cut through the very rock around them. Tane grabbed her hand, his eyes wild with excitement. They're here, Siora. The emissaries. Before she could respond, the emergency communication device at her belt crackled to life. Commander. It was Maran, his voice tight with panic. Multiple impacts on the surface, directly above our position. But it's not Tazari weaponry. These are landing craft of some kind. Dozens of them. Siora's mind raced. Could it be another alien species joining the Tazari in their conquest? Or perhaps scavengers coming to pick over what remained of their civilization? Seal all access points, she ordered. Activate the emergency protocols. No one approaches the surface without. Commander, Marin cut in, his voice suddenly different, tinged with what sounded almost like awe. You need to see the external feeds. Now, in the command center, dozens of survivors crowded around the few functioning monitors that still received input from their surface cameras, hidden devices that had survived the initial bombardment. The images they showed defied comprehension. The night sky above Nirella blazed with fire, not the destructive inferno of Tazari bombs, but controlled bursts as small craft descended through the atmosphere. And in orbit, barely visible through the atmospheric distortion, 3 massive ships dwarfed the Tazari vessels, their design unlike anything Siora had ever seen. But it was the ground footage that silenced the room. Armored figures moved across the blasted landscape with disciplined precision, their forms vaguely similar to Nirellans, but bulkier, encased in technology that gleamed under Nirella's 3 moons. And they were engaging the Tazari ground forces. What are we seeing? Siora whispered, unable to process the images. Beside her, Tane stood transfixed, his earlier excitement replaced by a sort of reverent shock. The emissaries, he murmured, just as the text described. On the monitors, the unknown warriors moved with lethal efficiency, neutralizing Tazari troops with weapons that seemed to bend light itself. Where Tazari forces concentrated, the newcomers deployed shields of energy that absorbed enemy fire. Siora watched as one of the armored figures threw itself over a group of Nirellan civilians who had been caught on the surface, protecting them from Tazari fire with its own body. They're helping us. Elder Urel's voice trembled with disbelief. A new tremor shook the command center, closer, more focused. The survivors tensed, many backing toward the exits. They're cutting through, Marin reported, checking the perimeter sensors. Precision energy tools. They'll breach the eastern accessway in minutes. Siora made a swift decision. Tane, take half the security team and meet them at the breach point. Non-aggressive posture, but stay alert. She turned to the others. The rest of you, prepare the evacuation routes in case this is an elaborate Tazari trap. And if it's not a trap, Colin asked, if these truly are saviors of some kind. Siora had no answer. After months of constant defeat, the concept of salvation seemed foreign, almost incomprehensible. The eastern accessway glowed red as the unknown energy tools cut through the reinforced door. Siora stood at the front of the greeting party, Tane beside her, both armed with the primitive shock weapons that constituted Nirella's best defense. With a final surge of energy, the door fell inward. Smoke billowed through the opening, momentarily obscuring the figures that stepped through. Then, as the air cleared, Siora found herself face to face with something she had never expected to see. The being before her stood slightly taller than the average Nirellan, its form encased in armor that seemed to shift colors to match its surroundings. Its helmet retracted with a soft hiss, revealing a face that was both alien and strangely familiar. Eyes, nose, and mouth arranged in a pattern similar to Nirellan's, but with subtle differences in structure. Its skin was darker than the typical Nirellan blue-gray, and it lacked the characteristic bioluminescent markings of her species. The being spoke, the sounds unintelligible but clearly language rather than the mechanical clicks of Tazari communication. Then it touched a device at its wrist, and its next words emerged in halting, accented Nirellan. We come in peace. We are humans from Earth. We have been monitoring Tazari expansion. We are here to help. The silence that followed was absolute. Siora felt Tanea's hand grip her arm, his fingers digging in with almost painful intensity. Why? The word escaped her before she could consider diplomatic protocols. Why would you help us? The human's expression shifted into what Siora would later learn was a smile, a gesture of reassurance among their kind. Because it is right, the human said simply, and because the Tazari threaten all free species. I am Major Alex Hart, United Earth Defense Force. And you are? Siora Vel, she replied automatically, acting commander of the Nirellan Resistance. Major Hart nodded, then gestured to the opening behind him. We've secured a perimeter above ground. Tazari forces are in retreat. We have medical supplies, food, clean water. Will you allow us to bring them in? It seemed too miraculous to be true. After months of unrelenting loss, the sudden appearance of powerful allies felt like a dream from which she would cruelly awaken. How do we know this isn't a Tazari deception? She asked, caution overriding hope. They've used psychological warfare before. Major Hart considered this, then reached up to remove something from his neck, a small metal disc on a chain. He held it out to her. This contains data on our species, our worlds, our history. Examine it. Verify our identities. In the meantime, I give you my word. No harm will come to your people through our actions. Sora hesitated, then took the disc. As her fingers closed around it, she felt the weight of her responsibility. 2,000 lives depended on her judgment in this moment. Bring your supplies, she decided finally. But your armed forces remain outside until we've confirmed your identity. Hart nodded, apparently understanding her caution. Agreed. He spoke into a device on his wrist, and within minutes, human personnel began transferring containers through the breached door. Packages marked with symbols Sora didn't recognize, but whose contents soon became clear. Medical kits, nutrition packs, portable water purifiers. As the Nirellan survivors cautiously approached these unexpected gifts, Tanae leaned close to his sister, his voice a whisper of wonder. The alignment, he said. The emissary stars. The ancient texts were right. Siora watched as her people received their first real nutrition in months, as human medical personnel began treating the injured with technologies that seemed miraculous in their effectiveness. Hope, that most dangerous of emotions, began to stir in her chest. Maybe they were, she conceded softly. Or maybe something even more remarkable has happened. On the bridge of his command ship, Supreme Commander Vorik watched with mounting rage as his ground forces retreated before the human assault. The tactical displays showed a catastrophic collapse of the Tazari containment perimeter, with 30% of his troops already neutralized. Identify these interlopers, he demanded, his exoskeleton bristling with anger spines. How did they penetrate our early warning systems? His intelligence officer worked frantically at the data stations. Unknown species, Commander. Their technology signatures don't match any in our conquest database. But their weapons. The officer hesitated. Speak. Their weapons technology exceeds our current capabilities by approximately 20%. And their defensive systems are highly adapted to our attack methodologies. Vorik stalked to the viewport, watching as human dropships continued to deploy troops across Nirella's surface. Hail their command vessel. I will speak with whoever leads this interference. The communication array activated, projecting a holographic image at the center of the bridge. A human figure appeared, dressed in a uniform adorned with symbols of rank that Vorik couldn't interpret. This is Admiral Helena Chun of the United Earth Defense Force. You are engaged in illegal genocide against a sentient species. Cease all hostilities immediately or face the consequences. Vorik emitted the clicking sound that served as Tazari laughter. You dare to challenge the Tazari expansion? We have conquered 17 sectors. We have extinguished dozens of species. You will be just one more footnote in our glorious ascension. The human's expression remained impassive. You were warned. The hologram disappeared. Moments later, alarms blared across the Tazuri command ship as energy signatures spiked around the human vessels. Evasive maneuvers. Vorik ordered, but it was too late. Precisely targeted energy beams lanced out from the human ships, bypassing the Tazari vessel's primary shields and striking their propulsion systems with surgical precision. They've disabled our engines, the tactical officer reported, panic evident in his voice. And they're jamming our communications with the fleet. Vorik's rage gave way to a new sensation, one he had never experienced in his long career of conquest. Fear. All weapons, target their flagship. The Tazari ship fired its main battery, the energy beam streaking toward the largest human vessel. But instead of impacting, the beam seemed to bend around the ship, redirected by some form of advanced defensive technology. Impossible, Vorik whispered. The tactical display flickered, then stabilized to show human. Troops boarding secondary Tazari vessels. With their command ship isolated and their fleet infiltrated, the carefully orchestrated Tazari assault on Nirella was rapidly disintegrating into chaos. For the first time in his existence, Supreme Commander Vorik considered the possibility of defeat. The medical bay of the UES Sentinel was unlike anything Siora had ever imagined. After verification of the human's identity, confirmed through both technological and cultural exchanges, she and Tene had been invited aboard the flagship to discuss alliance terms. But first, the humans had insisted on medical treatment for the malnourished and injured Nirellans. Siora watched in amazement as human doctors worked alongside medical AI systems to treat conditions that had been death sentences on Nirella for months. Bones were mended with regenerative therapy. Infections vanished under targeted nanite treatment. Even Emran's blindness was being addressed with what the humans called neural pathway reconstruction, a technology eerily similar to what Siora had been researching before the invasion. "Your medical science is extraordinary," she said to Dr. Alara Patel, the chief medical officer who had been assigned to escort them. Dr. Patel smiled warmly. "We've had a lot of practice, unfortunately. War has been a constant companion through much of human history." This surprised Siora. "You've fought among yourselves? But your coordination, your unity in battle against the Tazuri, is relatively recent," Dr. Patel finished for her. "For thousands of years, human fought human. Only in the last century did we truly unite. Some say it took the threat of self-extinction to teach us cooperation." Tene, who had been examining a holographic display of the human nervous system, looked up sharply. "You nearly destroyed yourselves?" Dr. Patel nodded, her expression solemn. "Several times. Through war, environmental collapse, AI rebellion. Each crisis brought us closer to extinction and closer to understanding what truly matters." "Which is?" Siora asked. "Life," Dr. Patel replied simply. "Consciousness in all its forms. The right of sentient beings to determine their own destiny. These principles now guide all human expansion and interaction." Major Hart entered the medical bay, his battle armor replaced by a fitted uniform. "Commander Vel, your brother. The Council is ready to meet with you on the command deck." As they followed him through the ship's corridors, Siora marveled at the integration of technology and organic design elements. The vessel felt alive in a way that reminded her of Nirella's bioengineered architecture before the invasion. "Your ship," she observed, "it has an ethical presence." Hart glanced back, pleased by her perception. The Sentinel-class vessels incorporate biological components, a neural network that helps the ship anticipate crew needs and respond to emergencies. "It's semi-sentient, you could say. Like your battle tactics," Tene added. We observe your troops protecting civilians even at cost to your strategic positioning. Hart's pace slowed slightly. Protection of innocent life isn't just ethical for us, it's strategic. The Tazari expand through terror and subjugation. We believe that creates inherent weaknesses in their empire. They entered a vast chamber dominated by a circular table surrounded by both humans and holographic projections of officers from other ships. Admiral Chun stood as they entered, extending a hand in what Siora now recognized as a human greeting gesture. Commander Vel, Tanae Vel, welcome to the United Earth Defense Force Command. Today marks the formation of the first human-Irellan alliance, and hopefully the beginning of the end of Tazari expansion in this sector. The meeting that followed was both strategic and revelatory. The humans presented detailed intelligence on Tazari fleet movements, command structures, and technological vulnerabilities, information they had gathered through covert observation over months of following the Tazari advance through the galaxy. We've been tracking their conquest pattern for over a year, Admiral Chun explained, manipulating a holographic display that showed the path of Tazari expansion. Nirella represents their 43rd target world, but the first where we've directly intervened. Why now? Asked Sura. Why us? A human officer, introduced as Intelligence Director Abrams, responded, 2 factors. First, our analysis indicated that Nirellan culture, while peaceful, possessed unique adaptability traits that could prove crucial to long-term resistance against the Tazari. Second, the strategic position of your star system creates a natural bottleneck for their fleet movements. You need us, Tanae said, understanding dawning. Admiral Chen nodded. As much as you need us. The Tazari can only be defeated through a multi-species alliance. Your people's natural empathic abilities and your world's crystalline resources provide technological possibilities our scientists have only theorized about. Siora felt a complex mixture of emotions: relief at finding allies, concern about being valued for strategic assets rather than moral worth, and a growing sense that events were accelerating beyond her ability to process them. The Tazari commander has requested terms, Hart reported, checking a data feed. Supreme Commander Vorik is offering to withdraw from Nirella in exchange for safe passage for his remaining forces. Admiral Chun turned to Sora, her expression serious. This is your world, Commander Vel. What terms would you accept from those who nearly exterminated your people? The question hung in the air, heavy with implication. All eyes turned to Sora, who found herself suddenly confronted with the possibility of victory after months of expecting only extinction. She began, then faltered. The physician in her wanted healing. The commander she had become demanded justice. I need to consult with my council. Of course, the admiral agreed. But be aware, the Tazari are masters of deception. Any delay may give them time to regroup or call for reinforcements. As if confirming these words, alarms suddenly blared throughout the command center. Displays flickered to show a massive energy surge from the disabled Tazari command ship. They're activating their orbital destroyer, someone shouted. Planetary targeting sequence initiated. Siora felt the floor drop away beneath her. The Tazari had one final act of vengeance, to obliterate Nirella entirely rather than accept defeat. Intercept options? Admiral Chen demanded. None available in time, came the grim response. Their weapon is drawing power from a dimensional rift. Our shields can't block it. Tanae grabbed Siora's arm, his eyes wide. The crystals, he said urgently. The resonance network. For a moment, Siora didn't understand. Then realization hit her. Beneath Nirella's surface ran a natural network of crystalline formations, structures that the Nirellans had incorporated into their architecture and technology for centuries. The network had been damaged in the invasion, but its core remained intact. Nirellans can interface with the crystal network, she explained rapidly to the humans. It's how we built our cities through bioharmonic resonance. If we could create a counter-frequency to the Tazari weapon, we'd need to amplify it beyond anything previously attempted, Tanae added, and someone would have to physically connect to the master node on the surface. Admiral Chun grasped the implications immediately. How long do you need to set it up? Siora calculated quickly. 20 minutes to reach the surface node. Another 10 to attune the crystals. But whoever connects to the network would be exposed to both the Tazari bombardment and potentially fatal levels of psychic feedback. I'll go. Tanae volunteered instantly. No, Siora countered. I have more experience with the attunement process from my medical work. She turned to Admiral Chun. If your forces can provide cover long enough for me to reach the crystal nexus, I believe I can create a shield that will disperse the Tazari weapon. The plan came together with desperate speed. While human ships moved to intercept the Tazari destroyer, buying precious minutes, Siora prepared for the surface mission. Human combat engineers provided her with a modified environment suit, protection against Nirella's now toxic atmosphere, and limited shielding against Tazari weapons. As she prepared to board the transport that would take her to the surface, Tanae approached, his expression torn between pride and fear. The old texts, he said softly, they spoke of this moment too. When darkness engulfs all, one must stand beneath open sky to channel the light. Siora managed a smile, adjusting the unfamiliar suit. I always thought you read too much mystical nonsense. Perhaps I was wrong. I'm coming with you, he insisted. As far as the entrance point, at least. You'll need someone to monitor your vital signs during the connection. She wanted to refuse, to keep him safe, but there was no time for argument. Minutes later, they were aboard a human dropship, racing toward the surface of their ravaged world. The landing zone was a nightmare of destruction. What had once been Nirella's capital city was now a field of rubble, illuminated by the eerie glow of fires still burning from earlier bombardments. Human troops had established a defensive perimeter, their advanced weapons keeping Tazari ground forces at bay, while Siora and Tanae, accompanied by Major Hart and a squad of specialists, made their way toward the Crystal Nexus. Tazari destroyer has locked targeting sequence, reported one of the human officers through their communication system. 8 minutes to weapon discharge. The Nexus chamber had once been the heart of Nirella's central governance complex. A naturally formed cave where the planet's crystal network converged in a spectacular formation resembling a frozen fountain. Now the entrance was half collapsed, the once beautiful approach reduced to a treacherous scramble through debris. The connection point is still intact, Siora confirmed, scanning the chamber with her medical device, reconfigured to detect crystal resonance patterns. But the ambient energy is chaotic. The invasion damaged the harmonic balance. Can you still establish the connection? Hart asked, his troops setting up defensive positions around the chamber entrance. Yes, but Siora hesitated. The feedback will be much stronger than I anticipated. Without proper stabilization, the connection could be fatal. Tanae stepped forward, removing a small device from his pack, one of the few Nirellan technologies they had managed to salvage. This attunement amplifier might help. It was designed for medical procedures, but I've modified it to enhance your natural resonance capabilities. Siora recognized the device, a prototype she had been developing before the invasion. How did you get this? I saved it, Tanae said simply. I always believed you'd need it again someday. A thunderous impact shook the chamber as Tazari forces intensified their assault on the human perimeter. 5 minutes came the update from orbit. Tazari weapon at 70% charge. No more time for hesitation. Siora attached the amplifier to her temple, feeling its familiar tingle as it synchronized with her bioelectric field. Then she stepped toward the central crystal formation, a towering spire that pulsed with faint luminescence. Monitor my vitals, she instructed Tanae. If the neural feedback exceeds terminal threshold, you'll need to break the connection manually. I understand, he replied, though his expression said otherwise. They both knew that breaking the connection prematurely would mean failure and the destruction of Nirella. With a deep breath, Siora placed her hands against the crystal surface. The connection was immediate and overwhelming, a torrent of information flooding her consciousness as the entire planetary network responded to her presence. Through the amplifier, she could sense the damage done to the system, could feel the crystalline pain of a world wounded by war. Above, the Tazari destroyer's weapon continued its charging sequence, drawing power from artificial dimensional rifts to create a beam that would fracture Nirella's tectonic plates. But now Siora could see it from the inside, could perceive the energy patterns as they built toward catastrophic release. With methodical precision born of her medical training, she began to harmonize the crystal network, channeling its natural resonance into a counter-frequency that would disperse the incoming attack. The process was excruciating, each adjustment sending shockwaves of pain through her nervous system as she essentially became the conduit for planetary energies never meant to flow through a single consciousness. Through a haze of agony, she heard Tanea's voice, distant yet clear. Her neural patterns are destabilizing. The feedback is too intense. Can you stabilize her? Hart's voice, urgent, not without breaking the connection. 3 minutes to weapon discharge. Evacuate surface teams immediately. Siora pushed through the pain, focusing on the complex energy matrices forming in her mind. The crystal network responded, its glow intensifying, spreading outward from the nexus in luminous veins that began to trace patterns across Nirella's surface. In orbit, the Tazari destroyer's weapon reached 90% charge. Supreme Commander Vorik watched with grim satisfaction as his defeat transformed into what would still be counted as a victory in the Tazari archives. Another world cleansed, another potential threat to Tazari dominance eliminated. Then his tactical officer noted an anomaly. Commander, unusual energy readings from the planet's surface. Some kind of network is activating across the northern hemisphere. Vorik dismissed the report. Irrelevant. Nothing can stop the destroyer once targeting is locked. On the surface, Siora had reached the critical phase of the attunement. The crystal network now glowed with blinding intensity, responding to her guidance as she wove its energies into a planet-wide defense matrix. Each adjustment brought fresh waves of pain, but also clarity, a deeper connection to Nirella itself, as if the planet were a living entity communicating through her. 1 minute to discharge came the warning from orbit. All personnel, brace for impact. Tanay watched in horror as his sister's body began to glow with the same luminescence as the crystals, her skin becoming translucent, veins of light pulsing beneath the surface. The amplifier at her temple was melting from the energy flowing through it. Siora, you have to stop, he cried. The connection is consuming you. But she couldn't stop. Not now, with the pattern nearly complete. Through the crystal network, she could sense the Tizari weapon preparing to fire, could feel the dimensional energies being channeled into a beam of pure destruction. With a final, desperate surge of will, Siora completed the attunement. The crystal nexus erupted with blinding light, the energy racing outward along the network until the entire northern hemisphere of Nirella was traced with luminous lines visible even from orbit. In the command center of the UES, Sentinel, Admiral Chun watched the sensor readings with growing amazement. The planetary shield is forming, reported a science officer. Energy signature unlike anything in our database. On the view screen, they could see the Tizari destroyer release its weapon, a searing beam of concentrated dimensional energy that struck Nirella's atmosphere with force enough to vaporize a continent. But instead of penetrating, the beam seemed to spread across an invisible barrier, its energy dispersing in fractal patterns that mirrored the crystal network below. 20 seconds to full discharge came the update. Planetary shield holding at 83% capacity. On the surface, Siora stood at the heart of the energy storm, her body now more light than substance as the crystal energies flowed through her. Through the network, she could feel every part of Nirella, the surviving flora and fauna, the hidden pockets of her people, the human forces fighting to protect them all. For the first time since the invasion, she felt not despair but a fierce, protective love for her world. The weapon is dissipating, Tanay reported, watching both his sister and the readings on the human devices. Siora, you've done it. But she couldn't respond. The connection had progressed beyond verbal communication. As the Tazari weapon expended the last of its energy against the crystalline shield, Siora felt her consciousness expanding through the network, becoming one with Nirella itself. Through tears, Tanae watched as his sister's physical form began to dissolve into pure energy, merging with the crystal nexus. Major Heart placed a hand on his shoulder, understanding without words the sacrifice they were witnessing. She's becoming part of the planetary consciousness, Tanae explained, his voice breaking. The ancient text spoke of this too, the ultimate communion. She'll live on, but not as we knew her. The light reached its zenith, then gradually faded, leaving only the softly glowing crystal nexus. Where Siora had stood, there was nothing but a faint luminescence in the air, like stardust settling after a cosmic event. In orbit, the Tazari destroyer hung powerless, its primary weapon depleted and its engines disabled by human counterattacks. Supreme Commander Vorik watched in disbelief as the supposedly primitive planet below glowed, with energy patterns far beyond Tazari understanding. Status report, he demanded, though he already knew the answer. Weapon discharge complete, his tactical officer confirmed. No effect on planetary target. Human vessels closing in on all sides. For the first time in the centuries-long history of Tazari conquest, a planetary invasion had failed. Worse, the defeat had been witnessed by all remaining Tazari forces in the sector, transmitted through their battle network as a warning. Admiral Chin's image appeared on his command screen again. Supreme Commander Vorik, your forces are defeated. Your weapon has failed. Surrender now, or face complete destruction. Vorik's pride warred with his tactical assessment. The Tazari did not surrender. It was not in their cultural lexicon. But neither did they throw away strategic assets without purpose. What terms do you offer? He asked finally, his voice stripped of its earlier arrogance. Unconditional withdrawal from Nirellan space. Return of all captured Nirellans. A formal treaty recognizing Nirella's sovereignty and establishing a demilitarized zone between your territory and this sector. Vorik's mouth parts clicked in bitter amusement. You ask much for a single victory. This is not negotiable, Admiral Chin replied. And this is not our only victory. While your attention was focused here, human forces have liberated 3 other worlds from Tazari control. Your expansion has not merely been halted, Commander. It has been reversed. The news struck Vorik with the force of a physical blow. How had this unknown species, these humans, coordinated such a comprehensive strategy? The implications were devastating for the Tazari Dominion. I will consult with the High Command, he said finally. You have 1 hour, Admiral Chin responded. After that, we finish this. As the communication ended, Vorik knew with cold certainty that the Tazari expansion had encountered its first true rival in the galaxy. Whatever the High Command decided, nothing would be the same again. On Nirella's surface, the aftermath of battle gave way to the first stages of recovery. Human medical teams worked alongside Nirellan healers, treating the injured and beginning the long process of detoxifying the planet's atmosphere. The Crystal Network, now permanently activated by Siora's sacrifice, accelerated the healing, drawing harmful particles from the air and restoring natural energy flows through the damaged ecosystem. In the 3 months that followed, a remarkable transformation took place. The Tazari, faced with a multi-front conflict against human forces and now aware of the crystalline defenses of Nirella, agreed to a formal treaty. It wasn't surrender. The Tazari cultural programming wouldn't allow for that concept, but it amounted to the same thing. Recognition of boundaries they dared not cross, acknowledgement of species they could not conquer. Tanae, now the leader of the Nirellan reconstruction effort, stood with Major Heart on a hillside overlooking what had once been the capital city. Already, new structures were rising, buildings that blended Nirellan bioharmonic architecture with human engineering principles, stronger and more versatile than anything that had come before. The construction teams estimate the first district will be habitable within weeks, Hart reported. The atmosphere scrubbers are working better than expected, especially with the crystal network amplifying their effect. Tanae nodded, his gaze fixed on the central spire taking shape at the heart of the city. a monument that would house the new interstellar council chambers, where representatives from Nirella, Earth, and a growing alliance of worlds would meet to coordinate mutual defense and cultural exchange. Have you decided whether to accept the ambassador position? He asked Hart. The Major smiled, looking more comfortable in diplomatic attire than he had initially. Admiral Chun made it clear it wasn't really a request. Apparently, my unique understanding of Nirellan culture makes me irreplaceable. She's right, Tane agreed. Few humans would have recognized what Siora was attempting with the Crystal Network, or supported her in time. At the mention of his sister, both fell silent for a moment. Then Hart gestured toward the horizon, where the crystal lines that now crisscrossed Nirella's surface glowed softly in the evening light. The science team detected unusual patterns in the network yesterday, he said carefully. Energy configurations that almost resembled neural pathways. They're beginning to think that the legends about the planetary consciousness might have a basis in fact. Tane smiled. I felt it too. When I connect to the secondary nodes, there's a presence there. Not Siora as she was, but something that carries her essence, her compassion, her determination. The Earth theologians would have a field day with that concept, Hart remarked. A planetary guardian spirit born from sacrifice. Is it so different from what your people did? Tane asked. Coming to the aid of species you barely knew, risking your lives for our survival? Hart considered this. Perhaps not in principle, though I doubt Earth's intervention was quite as mystical as your sister's transformation. They began walking back toward the temporary settlement where most of the survivors still lived while the city was rebuilt. Children ran past them, a mix of Nirellan blue-gray and human varied hues, already playing together in the new reality created by Alliance. The educational exchange program is oversubscribed, Tane noted. More human specialists volunteering to teach than we have facilities for, and twice as many Nirellans applying for study on Earth than there are positions. Cultural cross-pollination, Hart replied. The Admiral says it's the key to building an alliance that will last beyond the current crisis. Not just sharing technology or military strategy, but understanding each other's perspectives. As they reached the settlement perimeter, they passed a construction site where the foundation was being laid for what would become the Interspecies Academy, a center for both practical education and philosophical exchange. At its center would stand a statue depicting a Nirellan figure surrounded by crystalline light, one hand extended toward the stars. Tane paused, looking at the foundation markings. Have they decided on the inscription yet? Hart nodded. The committee approved it yesterday. It will read, just as all hope was lost, human soldiers landed, and everything changed. Simple, Tane said approvingly, though it doesn't capture everything that happened. The best memorials never do, Hart replied. They're starting points for the stories that follow. As night fell over Nirella, the crystal network glowed more intensely, tracing patterns of light across a world being reborn. In orbit, human and Nirellan ships patrolled side by side, their crews exchanging knowledge and culture as they maintained the peace so dearly won. And, somewhere in the vast crystalline web that now enveloped the planet, a consciousness that had once been Siora Vel watched over it all. No longer separate, but part of the world she had given everything to save. The galaxy had changed irreversibly. The Tazari expansion had been checked. A new alliance had formed. And it had all begun in the moment when, against all expectations, humans had arrived to stand with a people they had never met before, united by nothing more than the principle that life, all life, deserved the chance to determine its own destiny. 5 years later, the Interstellar Alliance had grown to include 17 worlds, each contributing its unique strengths to the coalition. The Tazuri, though not defeated entirely, had been contained to their original territories, their expansionist ideology gradually giving way to more cautious policies of trade and limited cultural exchange. On Nirella, the capital city had been fully rebuilt, its crystalline spires once again reaching toward the stars, but now they were interspersed with human-designed structures and visitor centers for other allied species. The scars of war remained visible in places, preserved as reminders of what had nearly been lost. Tanae, now serving as Nirella's representative to the Alliance Council, stood in the monument garden at the heart of the city. At its center rose the tribute to his sister. Not a traditional statue, but a crystal formation that channeled energy from the planetary network, creating a holographic image that shifted subtly with the moods and needs of those who visited. Major Hart, now Ambassador Hart, joined him there, as he did each year on the anniversary of the first landing. The council session went well. Tanae asked. Hart nodded. The technology exchange protocols have been approved. Nirella's crystalline computing advancements will be shared with all member worlds. Earth's agricultural terraforming techniques will be implemented here in the southern continents. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching as visitors from a dozen worlds moved through the garden, paying respects at the various monuments commemorating both the conflict and the alliance that had followed. Sometimes I still can't believe how it all unfolded, Tanae admitted. That a species we never knew existed would come to our defense in our darkest hour. That my sister would become part of Nirella itself. That out of such destruction would come a new era of cooperation. Hart smiled. Earth's history is full of similar turning points, moments when the worst circumstances revealed the best possibilities. As my grandmother used to say, it's only when the night is darkest that we see which stars shine brightest. Above them, the evening sky began to darken, revealing the first stars, including the emissary formation that had aligned on that fateful night 5 years ago. And among them, new lights moved, ships coming and going from Nirella, carrying diplomats, scientists, artists, and families between worlds that once had not known of each other's existence. The children born today will never know a galaxy without the Alliance, Tanae observed. They'll grow up with the idea of interspecies cooperation as simply the natural order of things. That's the true victory, Hart agreed. Not defeating the Tazari, but creating something that makes their philosophy of domination obsolete. As night fell completely, the crystal network activated its evening illumination, lines of soft light tracing patterns across the rebuilt city. And for just a moment, visitors to the monument garden would later swear the holographic image at the center seemed to smile, a brief, knowing expression of satisfaction at what had grown from sacrifice. The stars shone down on a world transformed, on a galaxy redirected from conquest toward community, and on the enduring truth that it started it all, that sometimes salvation arrives precisely when all hope seems lost, changing everything that follows.